Okay, let's start. एक मिनट रुक जाओ. आज we have to start with a new topic, which is the school of Nyaya. The Indian school of philosophy called Nyaya. So we've finished the heterodox schools, the three heterodox schools. We finished Buddhism, Jainism, and Charvaka. Now we'll start with the Orthodox schools of Indian philosophy, or the Astika Darshanas. Orthodox का दूसरा नाम है Astika, heterodox is Nastika, और Indian philosophy का दूसरा नाम है Darshana. So now we'll start with the Astika Darshanas. Good. So Nyaya is one of them, and we have to study the theory of knowledge of the Nyaya school. So let's start with the introduction firstly. Let's get introduced to the school of Indian philosophy. Now, Nyaya is the work of the great philosopher and sage Gautama. So Gautama is the founder of the Nyaya school. Gautama. Do not confuse this Gautama with Gautama Buddha. वो अलग आदमी है. ठीक है, वो तो heterodox Gautama Buddha. ये Gautama जो है, he is the founder of the Nyaya school. He's a different person. Now, it's a realistic philosophy based mainly on logical grounds. So, इसमें logic बहुत ज़्यादा है. It has great, put great emphasis on logic. This school of Nyaya is emphasizes a lot on logic. Realistic philosophy का मतलब realism is the view that the world that we experience, the universe, the reality that we experience, that is actually real. It's not an illusion. It's not a figment of our minds. It's actually real. The realism is when you say somebody is a realist, that means that they actually accept that the world out there is real. The universe is real. It's not an illusion. Acha, realism in epistemology is different. Realism in epistemology is called epistemological realism. यहाँ ये लिखा है ना कि Nyaya is a realistic philosophy. So it also has this notion of epistemological realism. कभी आता है, for example, in your, just generally you should know as philosophy students, epistemological realism is a kind of realism that deals with knowledge, because epistemology deals with knowledge. So usme we understand it as that the knowledge of the world that we get is real knowledge, or it is possible for us to get real knowledge about the world. So this position, this view is called epistemological realism. कि मतलब दुनिया के बारे में जो भी हम इल्म हासिल करेंगे वो कोई illusion नहीं होगा, कोई error नहीं है, कोई कुछ गलत नहीं है, वो actual reality है. उसे बोला जाएगा epistemological realism. क्योंकि बहुत सारे ऐसे schools आप पढ़ेंगे जो ये नहीं accept करते हैं, जो कहते हैं कि the world is not real, or knowledge about the world is not possible. Those are skeptics. Okay? So moving on. This has to be written a lot. I think we should emphasize this. That the Nyaya school places a lot of emphasis on logic and reasoning. The Nyaya school places a lot of emphasis on logic and reasoning. क्योंकि बाकी जो schools होंगे, जैसे हम संख्या पढ़ेंगे इसके बाद, उधर आप ज्यादा logic और reasoning नहीं देखेंगे. That will be more based on the texts like the Vedas. So authoritative texts like the Vedas. But yahan logic will be used a lot, and we'll see that. So it admits 4 separate sources of true knowledge. ये बहुत ज़्यादा important है. Mostly हमारा topic यही है कि according to the Nyaya school, there are 4 sources of true knowledge. 4 sources से हमको true knowledge मिल सकती है. Because we have to study the theory of knowledge, and also, like we said, इसमें lots of emphasis on logic है, and logic is also, obviously, it deals with the acquisition of knowledge. You need to have some amount of data knowledge to make propositions. तो जो Nyaya school है, according to the Nyaya school, there are 4 sources from which we can get true knowledge. 4 sources from which we can get true knowledge. Number one is perception or pratyaksha. Perception or pratyaksha. This is the spelling, Pratyaksa, pratyaksha or perception. This is all kinds of perception, by the way. मतलब 5 kinds of perception that we have. 5 senses से हमें 5 किस्मों का perception मिलता है. एक visual perception and auditory perception, or tactile perception, gustatory perception, our sense of taste, our sense of smell, our sense of touch. उन सब से जो perceive हम करते हैं दुनिया को, उसको बोला जाता है, that source of knowledge is called pratyaksha or perception. Number 2, inference. Number 2 is inference. This is another source of knowledge which the Nyaya school accepts as a valid source of knowledge. अच्छा, inference क्या है? दूसरा नाम इसका है, जो संस्कृत नाम है, अनुमना. Anumana, right? Inference, anumana. Inference is knowledge that is received by means of logical reasoning. Inference is knowledge that is received by means of logical reasoning. मतलब सीधा आप लिख सकते हैं, inference is logical reasoning. So I've given many a times, I've given the example. Jesse, imagine you have, there's so many things, so many times that we use inference in our life, we just don't pay attention. But let me give you an example. I've given it many times in the class, which is, आप चल रहे हैं, आप एक alley, एक गली में पहुंचते हैं. गली जो है मकान की या बिल्डिंग की, उसमें सिर्फ 2 ही दरवाजे हैं, एक राइट पे, एक लेफ्ट पे. राइट वाला दरवाजा बंद है, लेफ्ट वाला दरवाजा खुला है. आपको पता है कि आपकी फ्रेंड जो है वो इस गली से आई, या तो वो राइट पे गई होगी या तो वो लेफ्ट में गई होगी. मगर क्योंकि आप राइट वाला दरवाजा जो है उसे देखते हैं, you see that as being closed. You're walking in an alley, and there are 2 doors, one on the right, one on the left. One door is closed, one door is open. You know that your friend either went to the right door or the left door. Magar because you see that the right door is closed, it's locked, you will infer logically that she must have gone through the left door, jo khula hai. So this is a kind of, you're using logic. You did not see her with your senses. You did not see her with your eyes. You did not, maybe smell her perfume. You did not hear her voice. No, you did not perceive her at all. Magar by means of just using logic, you said she must have gone through the left door. So that is inference. That is inference. When you use just logic, not your senses. And we use it so many times in our life, that we infer many a times without seeing, without having any perception. For example, in a class, like, for example, if I did not show up for this class right now, you would infer that ma'am must have been busy, or ma'am must have gone somewhere, though that's why she's not here. Even though आप मुझे देख नहीं सकते, you don't know where I am, but you will infer कि just by use of your logic, क्योंकि मैम यहाँ नहीं है हमारे साथ, वो कहीं और होगी, या तो busy होगी, या तो XYZ. ठीक है ना? Number 2. Number 3 है comparison. उपमाना. Comparison और analogy भी बोला जाता है इसे. Comparison और analogy. Upamana. जिसे बोला जाता है. तो दिस इज नॉलेज बाय मीन्स ऑफ एनालॉजी. जैसे हम किसी चीज को समझेंगे by means of comparison. Let me give you an example. जैसे हम हम समझते हैं, like for example, we understand, school में होते थे, we had the moral science subject. So you want to understand the concept of good, or you want to understand the concept of evil, I'll give you a story. I'll give you a story in which I'll tell you, there was this boy, he did good things in his life, and then he was blessed with many blessings because of the good things that he did, and people liked him so much. He was well respected. So, with that, you will actually get the lesson that it's good to be good. It's good to be good. So, I'm giving you a comparison. I'm trying to impart knowledge by means of a comparison. कि आप ये compare करो, और ये आप एक analogy ले लो. Analogy भी इसे ही बोला जाता है. The analogy is a kind of a you want a similitude. So like for example, I'll give you the analogy of let's say, how will I say this? Of knowledge. I'll say, knowledge is like a tree. It grows, the more you water it, it grows higher and higher and greener. Now, knowledge is not a tree. मगर मैंने एक example use किया है, मैंने एक ये analogy use की है. तो analogy is like a similitude, an example to understand a thing. So just to make you understand, I've said that knowledge is like a tree. The more you water it, the more it grows beautiful and green. Meaning, knowledge जो है वो बढ़ती जाती है. जो आप ज़्यादा पढ़ेंगे, ज़्यादा इल्म हासिल करेंगे, your knowledge will continue to grow like that. So this is a source of knowledge which is accepted by Nyaya, which is comparison or upamana. And finally, because we said they have 4 sources of knowledge, the fourth source of knowledge accepted by the Nyaya school is testimony or shabda. Testimony or shabda. Testimony or shabda. So testimony, kyunki, now let me ask you this, because this is an Orthodox school of Indian philosophy, they are going to take the testimony of which authoritative source? They will take the testimony of the authoritative source, which is the Vedas. है ना? They'll take the Vedas as the authoritative source. Testimony हुआ एक किस्म का witness देते हैं ना, in the court you give witness. So that person has to be an authority. That person has to be somebody who is credible. जिसका हम बोलेंगे, oh, so and so's testimony was accepted because of XYZ reason. So testimony is witness of an authoritative source. Testimony is witness of an authoritative source or statement from an authoritative source, which is accepted just because क्योंकि ये एक authority है, क्योंकि ये एक accepted authority है, तो उसे शब्दा बोला जाता है. So exam में आपको question आएगा that write an essay on Nyaya's theory of knowledge. Extremely important आपके लिए है कि you have to discuss the 4 sources of knowledge according to Nyaya, which is, you will write, the Nyaya school accepts 4 sources of knowledge as valid. Number 1 is pratyaksha or perception. Number 2 is inference or anumana. Number 3 is comparison or upamana. Number 4 is testimony or shabda. This is very important. Now let's go into thoda sa inne jo diya hai iska definition. Perception is the direct knowledge of objects produced by their relation to our senses. Like we said, senses se jo knowledge milti hai, sense data. Inference is the knowledge of objects not through perception but through the apprehension of some mark. Of some mark as in कुछ साइन मिले आपको. जिस तरह हमें इन्फ्लुएंस की हमने एग्जांपल दी वो 2 दरवाजों की, आपको कुछ साइन मिला, उससे आपने फिर इन्फर किया, उससे आपने अपना लॉजिक इस्तेमाल करके, आपने देखा नहीं, आपने सुना नहीं, आपने सूंघा नहीं, कुछ भी नहीं, नो सेंस डेटा, मगर आपने अपना लॉजिक इस्तेमाल किया क्योंकि आपने एक किस्म का एक साइन देखकर आपने फिर लॉजिक इस्तेमाल किया. That's inference. Comparison is the knowledge of the relation between a name and a thing so named on the basis of a given description of their similarity to some familiar object. So इसमें हमने example जैसे दिया knowledge का with tree. So we said knowledge is like a tree. The more you water it, the more it grows. The more you give it more इसका बोलते हैं ना support, the more it grows. The more you work on it, the more it grows. So knowledge और tree में एक हमने comparison जैसा बनाया, एक relation बनाया, है ना? हुआ वो. और fourth one is the testimony, which is the knowledge about anything derived from the statements of authoritative persons. So any kind of knowledge which is derived from the statements of authoritative persons would come under testimony or shabda, as it's called, shabda. These four sources. Okay, now moving on. Now, the objects of knowledge according to Nyaya. What are the objects of knowledge? हमने sources of knowledge तो पढ़े, मगर अब objects of knowledge also related to this same subject according to Nyaya are the self. Self मतलब इंसान का अपना जो वजूद है. Self is sometimes called the ego also. Number one is the self. Number two is the body. Body is also an object of knowledge. Body से भी हमें knowledge मिलती है. Number three is senses. Number three is senses, and magar senses cannot give you any knowledge unless you don't have objects. So senses and their objects. क्योंकि आपके पास you can have all the senses, but if you don't have the objects to sense them, you can't really use your sense faculties. So senses and their objects. फिर cognition को भी एक object of knowledge बोला है, बुद्धि. बुद्धि. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 5 is mind or manas. Mind or manas. Number 6 is activity or pravirti. Activity or pravirti. Number 7 is mental defects, dosha. Number 7 is mental defects, dosha. Mental defects नहीं है, mental errors. Mental errors मतलब illusions. वो भी is an object of knowledge. It's taken as an object of. This is just supplementary information that you should have. Main है आपके the sources of knowledge, but you should know these things as well. अच्छा, these are the objects of knowledge. इन चीजों से हमें किसी किस्म की object मिल रही है, चाहे वो सही है, चाहे वो गलत है, that's not the point. But किसी किस्म की knowledge हमें मिल रही है. तो mental defects पे आप लिखेंगे mental errors or optical illusions. Optical illusions. Actually, not just optical, but you could just write illusions. क्योंकि ये mental है ना, ये बस visual नहीं. दोषा, दोष बोलते हैं ना, दोष is error. ये उसका दोष नहीं है, error, गलती. ये कौन है? अच्छा, give me a second. Yes, I'm back. Okay. Rebirth is also an object of knowledge. मतलब if you're not born again, how will you get knowledge, right? So pretya bhava, which is the rebirth. The feeling of pleasure and pain is also an object of knowledge. Suffering or dukkha is also an object of knowledge. When you suffer, you are getting some sort of knowledge. When you feel pleasure or pain, you are getting some sort of knowledge. And here, keep in mind, you see, we are having a very different conception of knowledge. Usually we think knowledge is what we get from books. But here, sense data is also called a form of knowledge. What we get from our senses, like for example, you're staring at the screen, or let's say you look left and you see some objects, that will also be taken as knowledge. In philosophy, that's also taken as knowledge. That is sense knowledge, sense data. Good. Okay. And finally, freedom from suffering, which is the apavarga. Apavarga is the freedom from suffering according to Nyaya school, which is also an object of knowledge. As you can see, they're using a different word. Sometimes we use moksha, Buddhists use nirvana. Nyaya is using a different word, apavarga. Apavarga. So this is something that you should know. कितने हो गए? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 sources, objects of knowledge. Sources nahi hai ye. Sources are just 4. Objects of knowledge are 11. Okay, moving on. Nyaya seeks to deliver the self from its bondage to the body, the senses, and their objects. So this is important. Just to remind you, this is absolutely important that we understand all of the Indian schools of philosophy. Their main objective is how to deliver the self, how to deliver or how to free the self from the bondage of the body, and how to get liberation. How to get liberation. How to free the body, the self, from the bondage of the body, and how to get liberation. This is the main focus of Nyaya and all other schools as well. Magar abhi kyunki we are speaking about Nyaya, this is something that you need to write, that the main focus of Nyaya is to liberate the self or deliver the self from its bondage to the body and attain liberation. And attain liberation. तो उससे हमें कुछ समझ आता है. We do understand that according to these schools of Indian philosophy, the body is kind of a kaid. The body is kind of a prison in which the self or the soul is kept imprisoned. So that is an important thing that we need to realize. कि मतलब they do not consider the body to be something which is positive. They consider the body to be something which is negative, which cages, जो इस हमारी रूह को कैद करती है. ये एक इम्पोर्टेंट चीज है. और न्याय स्कूल का ऑब्जेक्टिव ही ये है, मेन गोल है कि किस तरह इस सोल को आजाद किया जाए. Okay, so moving on. It says that the self is distinct from the body and the mind. मतलब जो ये self है, soul है. Self is the soul. This is different from the body and the mind also. Mind को भी ये अलग समझते हैं. The body is only a composite substance made of matter. तो बॉडी को ये बस एक मैटर का सब्सटेंस समझते हैं. अलग अलग किस्म के कंपोजिट सब्सटेंस है, अलग अलग इसमें सब्सटेंसेस मिलकर मैटर के ही है ये. तो बॉडी इज मैटर, मतलब बॉडी मादा है. बॉडी इज मटेरियल. Okay, the mind is subtle, it's indivisible and eternal. It's an eternal substance. Mind का ये अलग perception रखते हैं कि mind subtle है. Subtle का मतलब है कि it's a fine substance. It's not a material substance. Material substance को बोला जाता है gross. Gross. These are terminologies usually used in philosophy. So everything material, body, objects, they will be called gross. Gross. Gross substances. And mind, soul, such kind of immaterial substances, जो कि bodies नहीं है, जो कि एक किस्म की कुछ आप समझे subtle चीज है, उसको subtle या हाँ, subtle बोला जाता है. Immaterial things are called subtle bodies or subtle substances. Let's not get confused with bodies. Subtle substances. मतलब ये immaterial होते हैं, ये objects की तरह नहीं होते. Mind is indivisible. Like for example, a body is divisible. कोई भी body अगर लेंगे, let's take an object, we can cut it into many parts. According to Nyaya, the mind cannot be divided. It's indivisible. And it's eternal. It's an eternal substance. It does not end. And obviously that's pretty obvious because they believe in life, rebirth and birth. You know, they believe in the cycle of birth and rebirth. So for them, the mind jo hai, that has to be eternal. Okay, it serves the soul as an instrument for the perception of psychic qualities like pleasure, pain, etc. It is therefore called an internal self. Jo mind hai, it serves the soul. So you have to understand, they take it as two, soul alag, mind alag, or senses alag, or body alag. तो जो ये mind है, it serves the soul as an instrument for perception of psychic qualities like pleasure and pain. तो जो ये pleasure और pain होती है, इन चीजों की को experience करने के लिए the mind is used. According to Nyaya, the mind serves the soul in experiencing qualities, psychic qualities, matlab mind qualities like pleasure and pain, etc. So mind is called an internal sense. अच्छा, now the self. अब थोड़ा self के बारे में भी थोड़ा सा पढ़ लेते हैं. The self, according to Nyaya, is obviously Atman. They use the same terminology जो हमने उपनिषद में पढ़ी थी. Atman is the self. This is another substance which is quite distinct from the mind and the body. This is quite different. The self is very different from the mind and from the body. Mind सिर्फ जो आपके psychological ये है states हैं, कभी pleasure के, कभी pain के, वो perceive करता है. मगर जो self या आत्मन है, that is a completely different substance. Acha, liberation now, liberation. Notice the different word, apavarga. According to Nyaya, liberation is apavarga. It means the absolute cessation of all pain and suffering brought about by the right knowledge of reality. This is extremely important in your study of Nyaya's theory of knowledge, that you understand कि liberation, हमें पता है तमाम जो 3 और 9 schools of Indian philosophy है, उसमें main उनका focus है liberation. Main focus is how to get liberation. And in that, how to get liberation, they have different ways of how to get liberation. जो न्याय स्कूल है, न्याय स्कूल के मुताबिक लिबरेशन हमें सिर्फ नॉलेज, राइट नॉलेज से मिल सकती है. ये बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है. You have to get this concept very clear that according to the Nyaya school of Indian philosophy, liberation or apavarga, it's called apavarga. यहाँ इनने मोक्षा यूज नहीं किया है. इनके लिए it's called apavarga or liberation, which is the absolute end. Cessation हुआ end, absolute end of all pain and suffering. Absolute end to all pain and suffering can only be brought about by the right knowledge of reality. By the right knowledge of reality. मतलब इनके मुताबिक, न्याय के मुताबिक, इल्म या knowledge या ज्ञान से ही liberation मिल सकती है. अपावर्गा सिर्फ ज्ञान से मिल सकता है, और वो भी right knowledge. So तत्व ज्ञाना, they call it right knowledge of reality or तत्व ज्ञाना. Right knowledge of reality or तत्व ज्ञाना. अच्छा, liberation is only release from pain and suffering. वो तो हमको पता है. The existence of God is proved by Nyaya by several arguments. So they do accept God. It is a theistic school of Indian philosophy. Unlike the 3 schools जो हमने पढ़े थे, Jainism, Buddhism और Charvaka, they were atheistic schools of Indian philosophy. Now Nyaya is a theistic school of Indian philosophy. Nyaya accepts the existence of God. Nyaya accepts the existence of God, and they prove the existence of God by several arguments. God is the ultimate cause of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the world. Nyaya did not create the world out of nothing, but out of eternal atoms, space, time, ether, minds, and souls. अब ये important है, ये वैशेषिका जब हम पढ़ेंगे तब it'll come handy. मगर this has to be understood. न्याय और वैशेषिका school आप समझो sister schools हैं. They always come together. They have many similarities. Usually you study them together. जैसे यहाँ है न्याय वैशेषिका. So Nyaya Vaisheshika school, Nyaya school, as we are studying right now, they do understand that God is the ultimate cause. God is the ultimate cause of creation, maintenance, and destruction of the world. But they say that the world is not created out of nothing. They don't believe the world was created out of just essay, randomly, nothing. What they say is there are eternal atoms. The world is made out of eternal atoms. There's space, there's time, there's ether, their minds, and their souls. Ye tamam substances are accepted by Nyaya. Write these down, that according to Nyaya, the world consists of eternal atoms, space, time, ether, minds, and souls. Ether हमने पढ़ा था पहले. Ether is a kind of a subtle, invisible substance that fills the universe. It's a subtle, invisible substance that fills the universe. Okay, so ये बड़ा जरूरी है. जब आप वैशेषिका भी पढ़ेंगे, it will help you that both Nyaya and Vaisheshika schools accept the theory of atoms. Accept the theory of atoms. Accept the theory of atoms. We'll go into detail when we study Vaisheshika, मगर ये आपको लिखना जरूरी है. ठीक है. अच्छा, let's go. Okay, our time is up almost, but this is something that I'll share with you, and inshallah you can read this. This is extremely easy. Am I there? Yeah. Yeah, this is extremely easy, and inshallah maybe we can finish this tomorrow, but do read through this. इसमें यही same है. ये क्या बोलते हैं इसके sources of knowledge, and then some more sources of invalid knowledge. Invalid knowledge कौन सी है? Memory है, doubt है, error है, hypothetical reasoning है. These are invalid knowledge. Sources of valid knowledge तो हमने पढ़ ली, which is pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, and shabda. Sources of invalid knowledge bhi 4 hai. ठीक है? So let's complete this tomorrow, but do read this so that it becomes easy. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good day. Assalamu alaikum. Let me take this.